course, Apple and the Dow, and we just got 13 days to go. Can you believe it? Until this election, Donald Trump now on top in Florida, leading Mrs. Clinton by 2 points in a brand new poll out of the critical state. This as the candidate takes a break from politics, at least this morning, to open his new hotel in Washington. And the media, surprise, surprise, they ain't so happy about covering a hotel debut. Trish Regan, welcome everyone to the Intelligence Report. Donald Trump taking a lot of heat from the media today for promoting his brand. Donald Trump, however, pushing back, saying, you know what, a little bit of business sensibility is really what Washington needs right now, because people in business get stuff done, he says. Watch him.
My theme today is 5 words: under budget, ahead of schedule. That's what we did. Under budget and ahead of schedule. This is what I want to do for our country, and this is what we're working so hard to do.
All right, Trump is now heading to North Carolina, where he's going to be holding a couple of rallies later today. It's Florida, which is a must-win state for him. He's getting a little bit of good news in the way of a recent poll showing he's up by 2 points. Blake Berman is outside the new hotel at Washington's old post office pavilion. He joins us with the latest from all things Trump. Hey, Blake.
Hi there, Trish. Yeah, and Donald Trump is still here at the old post office, his new hotel in Washington, D.C. He heads to North Carolina about an hour or so from now. You're right. He was here this morning with his family by his side for this ribbon cutting, the opening of the hotel. 13 days left to go in the presidential race, and he is taking time out to be here alongside his family. But Trump tried to make a much larger point today. He said that he feels this hotel could eventually be a metaphor for what he wants to do for the rest of the country. Later this afternoon, as I mentioned, when he goes to North Carolina, we are told by the Trump campaign that his speech there will be about economic renewal. And it appears we got a little bit of a preview a little while ago. Listen here.
We have to choose most optimistic path. We have to choose to believe not our politicians that in many cases truly don't know what they're doing, but to believe in ourselves and in our country. If we do that, anything is possible.
A different kind of a tone there, Trish. I think you might have heard it. Trump said, I dream of the amazing possibilities we have. Just one of many quotes from Trump this afternoon. That speech is in Charlotte, an area that the Trump campaign says they feel that Hillary Clinton and Democrats have taken advantage of, or really haven't paid attention to for too long.
Yeah, Blake, he seemed to be sort of channeling Reagan, if you would, there with the softer,
right,
lower tone and a much more positive message. Let me ask you about someone who has not been so keen on him, and it's another Republican down there in your neck of the woods today. Mitt Romney taken to Twitter, to encourage people to go out and vote, just not necessarily on the presidential side.
Right, and there was an interesting dynamic today because Mitt Romney is here in Washington, D.C., speaking to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He was asked a lot of business questions and really his experiences over the last, or 4 years ago when he was on the trail. He didn't take any direct shots at Donald Trump then, but before he took to the stage, he went on to Twitter, and here's what he said, quoting here from Mitt Romney's Twitter. He said, be sure to head to the polls for GOP Senate, House, and state houses. They are essential to defend and advance constitutional conservatism. A couple things there. The obvious, as you can see, he did not mention to go to the polls for Donald Trump and for Republicans to win the presidency, but also talking about constitutional conservatism. It appears, Trish, he does not believe that Donald Trump fits that mold either.
All right.
Trish, back to you.
Thank you very much, Blake. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is holding 2 events in Florida today. It's her 69th birthday. Happy birthday. Her campaign also releasing 2 new ads today, airing in the battleground state, including this one, voiced by actor Morgan Freeman. Yeah, there's that whole sort of Trump is evil theme that she keeps hitting over and over again. You need to vote for her for the sake of what is good in the country. But it's not helping her right now in Florida, because take a look at that. He is now up in a brand new poll out of Bloomberg by 2 points in the Sunshine State. And that is where we find our very own Adam Shapiro right now. And Adam, tell me about this early voting data that's already in. It looks like Republicans are showing up in droves.
Yeah, the Republicans are actually leading overall as far as those who are registered to vote early over Democrats. Let me give you some of the numbers. Now, this is mail-in ballots as well as people going to polling stations, which opened on Monday for early voting. The GOP right now, you have 832,106 registered Republicans who have returned ballots or cast a vote. With the Democrats, you have 826,000, roughly 376,000 who have voted by either mailing in a ballot or going to a polling station. So the early voting battle is underway. What these numbers don't show you are the number of independents who have also voted early. And as you saw in that Bloomberg poll, that actually was leaning independents towards Trump. But Hillary Clinton was here in Lake Worth, which is essentially West Palm Beach. She was speaking to a rally about an hour ago of her supporters. And she was here at Palm Beach State College hitting the points she always hits, talking about the economy, talking about free college tuition, and talking about the middle class. Here's what she said about jobs and what she hopes to be able to do if elected.
A four-year degree should not be the only path to a good job in a middle-class life, right? Let's bring back technical education in high school so that more young people get the skills that will make them employable.
Trish, what she did not talk about was what we've been discussing all week, the incredible increases in premiums for Obamacare. In some cases, as much nationally as 25%. Here in Florida, about 20%. That's about $900 to $1,000, according to analysts, more every year for what used to be called the Affordable Care Act. She didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
Back
Real affordable. All right. Thank you so much, Adam. Yeah, in some states like Arizona, I mean, premium increases are like 100% or more. I digress. The race is tightening, I should point out, outside Florida as well. This is happening nationally because if you look at a brand new poll out just moments ago, it shows Donald Trump has slashed Hillary Clinton's lead by 5 points, bringing her advantage now to just 4 points. Just last month, she led by 9 points. What's going on? Joining me right now, Democratic strategist Marianne Marsh and Ned Ryan, the CEO of American Majority. Ned, you got these polls narrowing, but I wonder, are they still failing in some ways to capture the reality? In that the Trump camp would tell you, and they've insisted this all along, that the polls are not reflective of all the people that are actually going to come out and vote. What do you think about that line of thought right now?
Well, obviously we're going to find out in about 2 weeks, but I do think it's interesting. Again, we're coming down the home stretch. You're seeing the polls tighten up. Trish, I always thought this was going to be a much closer race than some of the media thought it would be. Again, you were mentioning Florida. You know, now Trump's ahead by 2 points in the latest Bloomberg poll. I think the interesting statistic in Florida, but you're seeing some other interesting statistics as well, but the one in Florida that's interesting to me is, you know, Trump is now about 0.3 of a point ahead in regards to absentee ballots and early voting, whereas the Democrats, where Romney lost by 3.5 points in Florida in 2012. So he's actually trending ahead of where Romney was. So, you know, again, I think there's reasons to be quietly optimistic. But again, we're going to have to see what happens when it comes down to, you know, the Rust Belt workers. Are they really going to take this opportunity to vote for Trump and not vote for Hillary? So I think there's going to be some interesting dynamics that we haven't seen. I also think, Trish, and again, it's more of a gut instinct, that there will be some sort of Brexit impact on the polling. I just don't know how much it's going to be. Maybe
listen,
a couple
I think
points.
You're right. I think, Marianne, I think Ned is making a very good point here. And it's a point that actually a liberal, Michael Moore, has made as well. He thinks that Trump is going to win this election, and it's because of this Brexit faction. It's because of people in the Midwest that have lost their jobs and that really have no shot at much of an economic future because things have changed so drastically in this country. So, Marianne, given that backdrop right now, she's got 13 days to go. How does she convince some of those people in places like Ohio, in places like Pennsylvania, that they need to vote for her when they're fearful that it may just be 4 to 8 more years of the same?
Well, 2 points, Trish. First of all, there's no evidence that there's any Brexit effect in this election. And if you go back 4 years ago, the Romney people were essentially saying the same thing. They thought they were going to win because they thought it was a likely voter election. It wasn't a likely voter election.
Okay, let me jump in, though, Marianne. Think about the voter that was supporting Mitt Romney, right? Think about Mitt Romney. I mean, he's not exactly the kind of guy that would inspire excitement. What Donald Trump has done, on the other hand, Marianne, is, I mean, you know, he's talking about a lot of things that, you know, Mitt Romney would say are not even conservative ideals. He's sort of turned this all on its head and gotten this emotional outpouring from people in a way that, you know, frankly, is nothing like what we saw from Romney.
Well, Trish, I appreciate that point, and there's certainly two very different candidates. But my point is, this isn't a likely voter election. It's not even a registered voter election, which Democrats do better in. There are many more newly elected, newly registered voters. And in a place like Florida, a lot of Puerto Ricans are now in Florida who are newly registered voters, who are going to vote, first-time voters. And that's not captured in the polls. So if there's anything that's underrepresented in the polls, it's these new voters, many of whom are Democrats. So I think that's where the Romney people missed the boat 4 years ago. I'm listening to the Trump people and the Brexit analogies. I appreciate it, but fundamentally, that's not what you see in the good polls. So that's the thing to look at here.
Are you saying Bloomberg's not a good poll?
I'm sorry?
You said that's what you see in the good polls. Are you saying Bloomberg's not a good poll?
No, actually,
Bloomberg might be
one of the best. No, Bloomberg's one of the best polls, as is Fox and as is the Wall Street Journal. Ann Seltzer is a rock star, and she does the Bloomberg polls, as is Dana Blanton at Fox News and the Wall Street Journal polls.
Okay, so what are you saying?
What
is it that you're seeing in the good polls that say is not reflected in what we're seeing out of the Bloomberg poll today?
Well, what you're seeing is, yes, there is a tightening in the polls, but what you also have to take into consideration is that the Clinton campaign has a ground game, which a good ground game is worth 3 to 5 points. This race says it. This poll says it's 4 points.
I want to talk some more about that. You know, ground game does matter and is so important. And yet, at the same time, he's got a whole different kind of ground game going in the way of these rallies that are just exciting these people. Ned, I know you got more to say. I'm going to see you guys in a little bit, so don't go anywhere. We got more stories to get to, including this new batch of emails belonging to Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman released today by WikiLeaks, including this bombshell revelation from an official at the State Department who emails that, quote, everyone at State used our private email, including, quote, sensitive but unclassified documents. Oh, boy. Seems like the whole culture of State was rather sloppy on security. We got the details and the emails next. All right, WikiLeaks releasing its 19th batch of emails belonging to Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. And we have just uncovered emails from a former State Department official that says everyone was using a private email. Wow, our own Peter Barnes is in Washington with the very latest. Kind of sloppy, Peter.
Yeah, that's right, Trish. We just dug this one up, and it does suggest that State Department employees regularly use their private email accounts, including to send sensitive documents. This one's a purported exchange from March 2015 from Anne Marie Slaughter, president of the New America Foundation, to Clinton aides. From 2009 to 2011, Slaughter served as director of policy planning at the State Department under Hillary Clinton. Slaughter was forwarding an exchange that she had with New York Times columnist Tom Friedman about Clinton's private email use. Slaughter wrote Friedman, quote, honestly, OTR, off the record, everyone I knew at State used our private email. I used Princeton when we were out of the office because it was so incredibly clunky and difficult to get onto the State system when we were not in the office. It was a complicated set of steps, and the system always froze or crashed. We sent sensitive but unclassified documents to our private emails so we could work on them at home and then sent them back to our work emails. Friedman told Slaughter in this exchange that he was still troubled by the matter, regardless of what she was saying there. After Slaughter forwarded her exchange to Clinton aides, one of them, Philippe Raines, wrote to his colleagues, there is just no good answer. We need to gut through the process phase, get them all out there, and let the content do the talking. Trish?
All right, Peter Barnes, thank you very much.
You bet.
The latest WikiLeaks dump shows also how worried the Clinton campaign was about the Clinton Foundation. Hillary's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, sent an email with the subject, quote, Foundation vulnerability points. I mean, the title kind of says it all, right? Here's some of the vulnerabilities mentioned in that email. Money from foreign governments. Especially lavish high-end hotels for events, and potential conflicts from overseas-owned organizations, UK and Sweden. Joining me right now for more analysis, national security expert and the author of the best-selling book, Defeating Jihad, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, welcome. Good to have you here. I guess the title kind of says it all. I mean, they clearly recognized that this could be a problem for them. So why wasn't it shut down earlier in light of the fact that she knew she was going to run for president?
I think because of what your colleague in Washington has divulged to us. It's simply a case of the rules don't apply to us. Let the peasants obey the rules that apply to everybody else. But if you work in the Clinton State Department, if you work for the Clinton Foundation, you're above all of that. You know, the government email is clunky. So who cares if we're talking about sensitive issues? This isn't about the national security of America. It's not about the State Department. It's about us. It's about the Clinton Corporation. What we have here is, in effect, political a corruption at an institutional level.
It seems, again, they recognized on one level that this would be a problem, that this could come back to haunt them. Do you think her inability to actually see this herself? I mean, these are the people around her, right? The campaign managers and all the people that are doing the sort of day-to-day work. Her inability to recognize herself that this was a problem. How does that affect your fundamental view of her ability to lead our country?
Look, you're always going to have powerful people, to a certain extent, always have a certain bubble around them. Yes, there's a lot of yes men, a lot of yes women. Mm-hmm. But this is beyond that. This is. Let's just look at one issue. Clinton Cash has given us scores of issues. Let's look at one issue. Mm-hmm. Uranium is a strategic national asset. Why? Because you make nuclear bombs out of it. When she was Secretary of State, we now know she had to sign off on the sale of 20% of our uranium as a nation to Russian companies that were linked directly to the Kremlin. She signs off on that, as her husband, through the foundation, is getting $140 million from the same companies. This is money laundering in the political world. This is pay for play at the hundreds of millions of dollars level.
You know, look, it's a big charge, and it's scary to think that this is actually happening, and yet you look at some of the money that was exchanging hands, and it certainly raises a lot of eyebrows and a lot of questions. Why is the mainstream media not more into this story? Do you think? I mean, is it too hard? Is it too complicated? You know, you got to follow the money, or is it simply that they are solving for the equation that they want Hillary Clinton to win, and they don't want to bring up this stuff?
I think, you know, it's easy to say, well, every time they dump 30,000 emails, you actually have to work.
You have to read them, yeah.
There are some journalists who don't want to work too hard. I think it's a bit more than lazy journalists. It is about the establishment, except for places like Fox and Breitbart. These people are rooting. Look at the donations from media to Hillary. 90% of journalists donating to a political campaign donate to the DNC.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Right?
I mean, to me, it's wild that a journalist is out there donating to a political right. You know, activist group to begin with. You know, I think that clearly is a bias, unless you're a columnist and an opinion maker.
Not if you're a journalist.
You shouldn't be, as a journalist, donating to one side or the other anyway. Dr. Gorka, always good to have you here. Thank you.
Great to be here, Trish.
Okay, illegal immigration still surging at our southern border, all happening right before the big election. Smugglers are actually telling people, and this is according to some reports, that if Donald Trump is elected, he'll build a wall, and if Hillary Clinton is elected, they will get amnesty. So regardless of who is elected, I mean, it seems the bottom line here is you need to get in while you still can, right? Joining me right now is former Colorado Congressman Tom Tancrendo. Good to have you here, sir. Tom.
Thank you.
Is there sort of a mad dash, if you would? I mean, people feel like they got to get, this is their last shot. They better get into the country sometime in the next 13 days. Seems like if I'm a smuggler, it's a good marketing ploy.
Well, it is a good marketing ploy. Or, you know, maybe the Mexicans know something that maybe they're not paying a bit of attention to the mass media here and saying, hey, Trump's going to win. Maybe he should use this as an outlying indicator, you know? Hey, they know something that we don't know, and that is Trump is going to win. It's not going to be a Hillary landslide like they think. So you better get in here now.
Well, with that in mind, though, you know, let me ask you about states like Arizona. I mean, why wouldn't he be actually polling better in places like that clearly have a real problem with immigration?
Well, of course, demographic issues there. I mean, we have had a big problem with illegal entrance into Arizona and all of our border states for a long time. The numbers are growing. That's exactly what they want to have happen. It's what the progressives want to have happen to the entire country. But it's happening along our southern border. It is a demographic reality that, you know, the more and more people who will come in here illegally and the more and more people who settle there are going to vote a different way than the people who had been there before.
Representative, let me ask you about sort of the economic component of all of this, because we know about the crime issues and we know about even the welfare issues, right, involved with taking in these new populations. What about the jobs issues? I mean, are they actually taking jobs or from Americans, do you think, that would otherwise be willing to work? Does it actually cause a depression in wages, in your view?
Oh, absolutely, because it is certainly a wage rate depression. Absolutely. There's no two ways about that, which is, of course, one reason why you've got the Chamber of Commerce supporting the whole concept of massive immigration of low-scale, low-wage workers. Absolutely depresses wage rates.
Although the Chamber of Commerce would argue that, you know, if you go out to a restaurant and you eat a nice dinner and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, that's in part because, you know, I don't know, maybe they have some illegal labor or working in the dishwashing component of the restaurant behind the scenes. So would it, in effect, cause sort of overall prices to go up and be kind of a wash?
Here's the thing. The Chamber of Commerce and all the businesses that employ illegal aliens and pay them wage rates that do not that are not the standard.
Right.
These people don't care about what happens to the rest of the. Look, you and I pay for the difference between what they're paying them and what it costs us as a society to maintain them. Health care, education, housing, all of that falls on the taxpayer. The business owner and the Chamber of Commerce couldn't care less about that.
They're exploiting these people and exploiting taxpayers, in your view.
Absolutely. And so, therefore, the Chamber of Commerce, they couldn't care less about that. That's our bit, you know, they say, hey, you handle that. You have to handle the social services part of it. We're here to make sure that businesses have the lowest possible wage rates. Well, believe me, it's not a wash. It costs us far more in taxes to support the low-skilled, low-wage earners in this country coming illegally than the savings that accrue to us by going to have a hamburger for 10 cents less.
Yeah. It's a fascinating topic and certainly one that people are very concerned about and worked up about for so many different reasons right now. We love having you here. Thank you. Please come back, Congressman. Good to see you.
It's a pleasure anytime.
Why do you think this is happening in such a blatant way right now? I mean, some might say Trump is kind of bringing it on himself, going places that, you know, traditionally people don't go and saying things that people traditionally don't say. But is it all him?
No, it's not all him. Certainly, he owns his own campaign. But when our research director, Rich Noyes, went through all this, what he found is just an astonishing amount of hostility from the press toward Trump. And the reality of that is the press have stepped off the sidelines this election in an unprecedented way. They're not pretending anymore. There's none of this, well, we're neutral garbage that people wouldn't believe before. Now they don't even want to try to pretend.
It seems to me there's something pretty dangerous about that, though. On the one hand, you know, hey, transparency is great. And you want that to a certain extent because it's not fair if someone's, you know, pretending not to have a viewpoint and then just presenting the facts in one way. That said, Dan, you know, one of the things that journalists do pride themselves on is this ability to try and see both sides, and even if they feel one way, to make sure they present both sides. Are you telling me that mainstream media, journalists with a capital J, have said, just to heck with it? Who cares? Why bother anymore? We're doing more of a service for the country by telling everybody how bad a President Donald Trump would be?
Well, yeah, first of all, I would argue that it's not mainstream at all, that this is not a reflection of mainstream American thought. It's a reflection of journalistic thought. And, yeah, they're outlandishly biased. It's not just the 91%. The coverage of Hillary was bad as well, but the amount of statements devoted to Trump, 10 times the number of negative statements about Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, the 2.5 times more about Trump scandals and Clinton scandals. There's not a neutrality going on here. This is journalists saying they think that Donald Trump shouldn't be elected, and they want it reflected in almost every news story they do.
Yeah, and yet, I think a lot of voters, they just don't care. In fact, they hate the media so much that it may actually, in some weird way, actually help Donald Trump. Anyway, Dan, it's good to see you. I appreciate you being here. I got to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, Donald Trump is scaling back his big-ticket fundraising events in the final stretch of this election. But since these events pay for the Republican Party's get-out-the-vote effort, some Republicans are getting kind of nervous that this could put control for the House and the Senate in jeopardy. Joining me right now, Evan Siegfried, one of those nervous Republican strategists, and also Steve Cortez, a member of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Committee. Good to see both you. I don't know, Steve, I'm thinking 13 days to go, and Donald Trump's probably thinking there's just no point, real point anyway, kissing up to the likes of the donor class like Sheldon Adelson and company. Perhaps he's better off just getting out to those rallies and getting his supporters excited, get the base out. Is that perhaps correct?
Well, listen, I think that's part of the thinking. Yeah, absolutely, is the candidate himself needs to be out there connecting with everyday Americans, and his schedule can only be described as frenetic. I mean, this guy does not stop campaigning. He's going to do that right through the finish line here. In terms of money, though, I do think it's important to know we're not done fundraising by any stretch. He himself is just not going to be doing it in these final days, but his family members are. Lots of surrogates are. So fundraising is going to go on right through the tape here. We are well-financed as a party. We're well-financed as a race. I think what's going on here, the Washington Post, I think in particular, who sort of broke this story, there's really no story there in my view, they have continually tried to act as though there's this enormous dissent, either within the Trump campaign or between Trump and other Republicans. And look, we are an outsider.
Come on, Steve.
Well,
there's totally. I got one right here on with us right now. Evan, he'll tell you how upset he is about Donald Trump. I mean, Mitt Romney today tweeting, go out and vote, for your Senate race, your congressional race, but doesn't bother to tell anybody
Trish,
to vote
listen,
for the presidential race.
If you're talking about Republican elites, I couldn't be more in agreement with you. Absolutely.
The same
the elites of Washington
who are voting for Evan McMullin over your guy in the most conservative state in the nation, Utah, where you've sent.
No, we're going to win. We're going to win Utah.
You sent Mike Pence to Utah today to try and shore up support in the most conservative state in the union. That's not being on offense. You're playing defense.
Okay,
You're
that's not,
losing campaign.
Evan, let me jump in here for a second, because I think that this is perhaps fundamentally part of the problem with the Republican Party right now. I mean, they can't get a hold of themselves. And by the way, they've had this problem before. Think back to when Mitt Romney was running, right? And the field was, Newt Gingrich against Mitt Romney, and Newt went to town on him in such a way that came back to haunt Mitt Romney later in that race. In other words, historically now, in recent times, Republicans, for whatever reason, don't want to get along, and they don't want to work together. And this is part of the problem, Evan.
Mitt had 90% of Republicans supporting him. Donald Trump is in the high 70s, and that's a huge problem for him. And that's because he has not made any effort to consolidate. If anything, his cutting off these fundraisers for the RNC is a big problem because he's relying on the RNC itself to provide his ground game, his field operations, and his data. All three things his campaign doesn't have itself. So when you're going up against Hillary Clinton,
they're not spending any money on commercials for him, though. That was something that was odd. They're
spending their money. They're spending $3.2 million on Make America Great Again hats and $1.8 million on polling. I would take the polling over the
commercials.
And
you take the polling over that. What I'm getting at here is, if a party wants to win, and one would assume, with the Supreme Court at stake, with the economy at stake, with the future of the country internationally at stake, you'd assume conservatives would want to win, yet they're just refusing to back this guy. And here we are 13 days from the election, and you're still not going to vote for him. Mitt Romney's still not going to vote for him. The Bushes, it seems, that aren't too interested in voting for him. How does that affect him overall? Steve, I'll throw it to you.
Trish, if this election were about Republican elites, about establishment Republicans in newsrooms in New York or in K Street parlors in Washington, D.C., then we clearly would lose this election. Thankfully, it's not up to them. It's up to tens of millions of working Americans, people who feel forgotten and dispossessed by a crony system, which has been
and I think it's in some ways
complicit in that system.
It's no longer about parties. You're going to see a lot of crossover. For example, Evan, Steve, thank you so much. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. All right, before we go, here's an interesting little story for you. You better check your state laws before taking your phone into the voting booth and taking a selfie. The pop star Justin Timberlake is learning that one the hard way. He